Hey you guys, it's your girl Internet, and today I be coming at you with the reaction, and it's called What Most Experts Won't Tell You During Black History Month. Now, what is they trying to keep from us? Like, what is they not telling us during Black History Month? Like, what's going on? So, I'm going to get into this video so we can see. But don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn your notifications on so you can see me. And let's get into this video. Because I want to know what they got to say. Like, what is it? Like, come on.
As for Black History Month, I'm not a fan. I'm with actor Morgan Freeman on this one.
Wait a minute. So now y'all don't want Black History Month? After these people done gave their life for it? Y'all don't want it now? Okie dokie.
Black History Month you find
ridiculous.
why?
You're going to relegate my history to a month?
Right.
What do you do with yours? Which month is White History Month? No, come on, tell me.
Well, I'm Jewish.
Okay, which month is Jewish History Month?
There isn't one.
Oh, why not?
Yeah.
Do you want one?
No.
I don't either. I don't want a Black History Month.
Okay. I can kind of see where he going with that. Like, he don't want to just confine just, like, everything Black History into just a month. Then they give you February, the shortest month of them all. So, like, every day is Black History Month, just like every day is Jewish, and every culture, Asian and all like that, like all of them. I feel like every day, as long as you want to celebrate your history, and no matter what you are, you do that. That's just how I feel. But I see where he's going when he say he just don't want a Black History Month. I kind of see that. I kind of see it. I kind of see where Morgan Freeman going.
Black history is American history.
Right.
Now, maybe Black History Month wouldn't be so bad if they actually taught Black history. Here are a few things that blacks are misled about: slavery, gun control, and the minimum wage. First, slavery. Now, when I studied slavery in high school, I assumed, the way a lot of people do, that slavery was something that just happened to black people in Africa.
Right.
One of the sad things is that we talk in this country as if slavery was something unique to the United States or to blacks and whites. And in point of fact, slavery was one of the oldest institutions among human beings.
Yeah.
They go back as far as there is recorded history.
Like, I didn't find that out until, I knew about, back in the Bible time, because I used to watch we used to have this movie called Moses. Everybody know the story of Moses and stuff like that. And then, I knew they had slaves in Moses and stuff like that. So, being a little kid, you really not going to think about slavery and all like that. You see it on TV and stuff like that, but you're not going to really, think, oh my God, these people are slaves. But then when you get older, you got to kind of go back and be like, didn't I see something like this before? Wasn't it on some movie? And that's the only thing, I can really think of, kind of comparison to, slavery. But still, though, the people are in Africa just the same. So,
in every single part of the world, Polynesians enslaved other Polynesians.
That's what slavery
For most of history, people enslaved people who were the same race as themselves.
Yeah.
For the simple reason that they simply didn't have the resources to go to another continent and take people from another continent and move them en masse someplace else.
Now, slavery could not have happened without the complicity of African chieftains, who sold Africans not just to European slavers, but to Muslim slavers as well.
But when white captains came offering manufactured goods, weapons, and rum for slaves, African kings and merchants had little reason to hesitate. They viewed the people they sold not as fellow Africans, but criminals, debtors, or prisoners of war from rival tribes. By selling them, kings enriched their own realms and strengthened them against neighboring enemies. African kingdoms prospered from the slave trade, but meeting the Europeans' massive demand created intense competition. Slavery replaced other criminal sentences, and capturing slaves became a motivation for war rather than its result. To defend themselves from slave raids, neighboring kingdoms needed European firearms, which they also bought with slaves. The slave trade had become an arms race, altering societies and economies across the continent.
Did you know that Muslim slavers took more blacks out of Africa than did European slavers? The Muslim slave trade began centuries earlier and continued long after the European slave trade ended.
I did not know
Slavery, yes, during the 9th up to the 13th century, slavery was still very much an Islamic phenomenon as compared to the West. Of course, there was ancient slavery in many other societies, but in terms of chattel slavery, in terms of slavery as an institution, that was profitable. That was very much still an Arab Islamic preserve until the West came in sometime from the 15th, 16th century onwards.
Just how extensive was this Arab Muslim slave trade of Africans?
But slavery was a very important part of Islamic expansion in West Africa, and in fact in the Sudan, and from the very earliest period of Islamic penetration into.
I'm not trying to be off topic or anything like that, but just imagine if that man was a professor and y'all had to sit in a class for 45 minutes and listen to him explain something. Tell me if y'all could have made it, because I just had got that much of it. I was about to drift off. I mean, what he's saying is important, though, but still, though, you're just trying to just focus and listen to what he's saying, because he's giving good information. It's just his voice.
To Africa. It started by buying, purchasing slaves and trading in slaves. And then it went on from purchasing to raiding for slaves and capturing slaves deliberately, especially mainly black Africans, and transporting them into North Africa and into Saudi Arabia, the Arabian Peninsula, and onwards to the Ottoman Empire to Turkey. So slavery was a very endemic part of Islamic interaction with Africa. And in West Africa, the jihad's period of the 18th and 19th century involved massive slave raiding and slave trading. And many of the slaves that were captured and sent and sold and taken in the slave trade, most of those who were doing the raiding at the time were Muslim communities because they were the dominant tribes. So a lot of that happened. That is not to say that non-Muslim communities were involved in raiding, but the dominant tribes were the Muslim communities that were doing the raiding at the time.
Now, I've heard that Muslim...
Wow, I did not know, like, the Muslim was the dominant traders. Like, I did not know that. I would just thought, like, the European people was just, like, the main people. I didn't know, like, the Muslims were like that, though. Like, they were, like, the main people, though. Learn
slavers
something.
And Muslim slave owners treated slaves better than did European slavers and European and American slave owners.
Oh.
But is that true?
One of the themes I explored in my book is this perception that Muslims treated their slaves much more humanely than the Western slave trade. And what I found out in my own research was that that is not necessarily the case, and that there were very harsh treatments of slaves by Muslim groups. It was just a done deal at the time.
Right.
And one of the key differences I looked at in my book whereas slaves taken to the West were able to marry and reproduce and have their families, and you can still find large populations of African Americans today in North America and in the Caribbean. You go to the Islamic world and you find very few black remnants of the slave trade, which was very massive. And one of the reasons is that many of the male black slaves taken into the Islamic world were castrated as eunuchs, which meant that they could not, of course, reproduce.
Right.
And the other factor is that many of the women were taken as concubines by their slave masters, and they gave birth to mixed races, and they were very much absorbed into the society. So you don't have black slave.
So we all know what concubines are. Them taking to be their wives and stuff, and do other things with them. That is sad, man. That is so sad. So y'all take the men, whack they, what, and then they take the women and make them their concubines. I mean, but they want to make more African kids. That's what they want to make. They don't want to be mixed. Maybe they did. Maybe some of them. I highly doubt they did.
Kind of descendants in the Muslim world,
right,
as you would in North America. And part of the reason is the castration and the way the slaves were treated.
Now, slavery ended in the West, in America not until after the Civil War. But what about the Arab-Muslim slave trade? When did it end? In fact, has it ended?
Slavery persisted in Islamic countries far, far longer than it did in the West. The West abolished slavery long before the Islamic countries ever abolished slavery. And they did so under a lot of pressure from colonial governments and from Western governments and from all kinds of activist groups. And in fact, the Saudi Arabia, for instance, abolished slavery in 1961 or 1960 thereabout, whereas Mauritania abolished slavery in 1981.
Golly.
And these were done on paper, and a lot of it is still being done. In practice, there are still a lot of slaves in Muslim countries. And Sudan, during the Civil War, there was a lot of slave raiding going on done by the Arab Muslims in the north against the enemies and the Christian Africans in the south. So even up to the 90s and this century, there was still capturing of young African men, boys in the Sudan for sale. So slavery continues, even though it has been abolished on paper in many Muslim countries.
Gun control. Liberals, especially those living in the inner city where crime is high, often demand further gun control legislation.
We fought a good fight earlier this year, but we came up short. And that means we've got to get back up and go back at it, because as long as there are those who fight to make it as easy as possible for dangerous people to get their hands on gun, then we've got to work as hard as possible for the sake of our children. We've got to be ones who are willing to do more work to make it harder.
Are black students taught that the gun control movement began in this country as a means to make sure newly freed black slaves did not get their hands on guns? In the most infamous Supreme Court decision ever, Dred Scott, the Supreme Court Justice Roger Taney said, if blacks are anything other than chattel property, they may be able to get their hands on guns.
It was a horrible, racist Southern Democrat judge named Roger Taney, and he determined that Dred Scott could not count for more than 3/5 of a person. Why? Because Dred Scott couldn't have a firearm. In fact, Judge Taney later noted, and this is in a chapter in my first book, Hands Off My Gun, that in order for him to give Dred Scott full citizenship and count him as an actual law-abiding American, that meant that Dred Scott would have the, quote, full liberty to have and to bear arms. And Judge Taney couldn't have that.
Next, Democrats love them some minimum wage, don't they?
Tom Steyer wants a higher minimum wage. The billionaire says that.
Do y'all think we need to push up minimum wage? But I feel like when you push up minimum wage, you pushing up everything else. Food, housing, everything. Like, why everything? Why minimum wage just can't go up and then the food prices go down? Because food high. It's very high. Gas is kind of high. It depends on which one you get. I get the one in the middle. I think that's 89. Yeah, I get 89. I don't get 93. That's a little too expensive. Yes, food. Why they just can't make cigarettes go up? Sorry, my smokers. I'm sorry. I know a lot of people that smoke. I mean, golly, let y'all still go. I'm just playing. I'm just playing because I know everybody they happy. They want to still be able to pay for some food too and stuff like that. I'm just joking. But, yeah, food needs to come now. Food is sky high. Paper towels are sky high. Everything. Like, stuff just really high right now. And I can only imagine it's only going to go up. Because I remember, like, back in the day, you could get, like, y'all remember, like, them little chips and stuff like that, them little bags of chips that you could get, like, 4 for $1 or something like that. Then, now it's, like, 2 for $1. Golly, I want my other 2 bags of chips. And then, like, I think when I was, like, a teenager, I ain't that old. When I was, like, 10 or 12 or 13 or something like that, that was, like, 3 for, like, $1. So they was just bringing it on down. Now them little bitty bags of, like, corn chips and all like that, they're going to be 1 for $1. And they're going to be them little bitty bags. Because the other bags, they already, like, $2.89, almost like $3. So, let me not get started on eggs and chicken and beef.
He would propose paying workers at least $22 an hour if he wins the White House. Steyer floated the idea yesterday during a campaign stop in South Carolina.
Now, during Black History Month, our black students taught that the minimum wage movement in this country began as a means to make sure that blacks who are willing to work for less did not take jobs away from whites who are unwilling to work for less. By the 1960s, many African Americans were employed as farmers. This changed in 1967 when the government extended the minimum wage laws to American farmers as part of the war on poverty. Black farmers who were accustomed to making a modest $3.50 per day were now legally required to be paid $1 per hour, a tremendous increase in wages. The effect of this law was immediate and undeniable. An estimated 25,000 farm workers were put out of work in the Mississippi Delta alone. Black farmers were not oblivious to the cause and effect. That $1 an hour ain't worth nothing, said the wife of one day laborer.
Right.
It would have been better if it had been 50 cents a day if you work every day. 50 cents per day, of course, was a lower wage than what her husband would have been earning prior to the law. Her point was clear. The federal minimum wage law destroyed their ability to earn a living.
Ooh.
End of quote.
The first minimum wage law in our country was the Davis-Bacon Act of 1931.
Okay.
And the Davis-Bacon Act says that all workers in federally funded or federally assisted construction projects must be paid the prevailing wage. And if you look on page 6513 of the Congressional Record on March 31st, 1931, you'll see congressional testimony where congressmen will say, see that contractor over there? He brings cheap colored labor up from the South, puts them in cabins, and it's labor of that sort that has to compete, that white Americans are competing against.
One of the things that my friends on the left think is just grand is the minimum wage. And 100 years ago, the minimum wage came into being in the United States, state by state, and its declared purpose was to keep immigrants, women, blacks, and Chicanos out of the labor force, to drive them out.
Child, they might as well. They might as well. Look at it. Look how much you get paid. They might as well. Ain't minimum wage still $7.25? I hate it went up. Because I don't know how to make minimum wage. I don't guess. I don't know. I probably am making minimum wage and don't even know it. But obviously they playing work because you can't even live on minimum wage. I remember when I was like young, fresh out of high school and stuff like that. I didn't want to go to college so soon or whatever like that. I was working 2 jobs, stuff like that and stuff. I was like, oh, this ain't for me. I went back to school. I might not completed it all the way, but I was almost there. Minimum wage, if that's what they playing with, I feel like they really succeeded because it's so hard. I'm telling y'all, man. Like, I promise you, every day I would go to my job and stuff like that. I was like, man, I sure wish I was a little kid. My mama, my grandma, my granddad, and my dad, I always said, you always talking about you want to be grown. You want to be grown. When you get grown, you're going to wish you was a child. And I promise to God, I wish I do. I promise you I do.
Entirely. Mm-hmm. Newspaper editorials, the economics profession, they all said, oh boy, this is good for the Anglo-Saxon race.
Thus, the consequences of minimum wage rates have been almost wholly bad, to increase unemployment and to increase poverty. Moreover, the effects have been concentrated on the groups that the do-gooders would most like to help. The people who have been hurt most by minimum wage laws are the blacks.
Yes.
I have often said that the most anti-Negro law on the books of this land is the minimum wage rate.
Ooh, what you said.
I'm Larry Elder,
what you said.
And we've got a country to save. I'll see you next time.
Now, he ain't lying about that because the minimum wage have took our black butts down through there. Oh, it whooped our tail. I'm going to say something else. Because Lord knows. You guys tell me what you thought about that. And each subject with the gun control, minimum wage. And just tell what y'all thought. Because that's a good topic. Those are good topics for black people and stuff. And just not black people, just anybody. Because you know, like people who just coming out of jail and stuff like that, they have like things they just already a target, and they already feel like they're a target too. So I know like black people just come out of jail, immigrants and stuff like that. Even poor, I don't know how to say it, but you know, poor white people and stuff like that. I mean, just especially when you look a certain type of way, people judge you. And I really feel like it's judging you. I really do. But you guys, you tell me what you think. And I get back with y'all in the next one. Bye, you guys.